The first thing Oliver Grant noticed was the silence. Not the comfortable kind that belongs in fine dining rooms, but the exhausted silence that settles after midnight, when the last customer leaves and only the clatter of plates and tired breathing remain. The restaurant, one of London's most profitable high-end establishments, was spotless, glowing softly under dimmed lights. To the world, it was a symbol of success. To Oliver, standing there in a borrowed black apron and worn shoes, it felt like a confession waiting to be overheard. No one here knew who he was. To them, he was just Ollie, a temporary hire sent by an agency, another body to scrub plates and keep his head down. And that was exactly how he wanted it. As CEO of the parent company that owned over 40 restaurants across the UK, Oliver had learned something uncomfortable over the years. Numbers lied less than people, but they also hid more. He had come undercover because profits were soaring, yet staff turnover was mysteriously high. And then he saw her. She moved quickly, almost invisibly, stacking plates with mechanical precision. Her hair was tied back hastily, strands escaping and sticking to her damp forehead. Her name badge read Lena. She couldn't have been older than 25, but her eyes carried the weight of someone much older. Double shift? Oliver asked casually, rinsing a pan beside her. She nodded without looking up. Third this week. That's rough, he said. They paying overtime at least. Her hands paused for half a second, just long enough to notice if you were looking for it. Then she shook her head. No. It's complicated. Complicated was rarely a good sign. Over the next few nights, Oliver watched carefully. Lena arrived before anyone else and left after everyone. When mistakes happened, she took the blame, even when they weren't hers. When other staff slipped out early, she stayed. When the supervisor barked orders, she said nothing. Once, at nearly 2 a.m., Oliver saw her quietly hand half her staff meal to a younger kitchen porter who looked barely 17. You didn't eat, Oliver said softly. I'm not that hungry, she replied. But her stomach betrayed her with a low growl. Oliver felt something tighten in his chest. By the end of the week, he knew one thing for certain. Lena was working double shifts without pay. Not occasionally. Regularly. And no one seemed surprised. The real shock came when Oliver checked the internal system from his hotel room that night. According to official records, Lena was clocking out on time. No overtime. No violations. Perfect compliance. Someone was altering the logs. The next evening, Oliver stayed back deliberately, pretending to scrub a sink that was already clean. The restaurant was nearly empty when the floor manager, Marcus, strolled into the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, confidence dripping from every step. Still here, Lena? Marcus said, glancing at his watch. Didn't I tell you to clock out? Yes, she said quickly. I did. Marcus smiled, a thin, unpleasant curve of the lips. Good girl. Then you won't mind finishing the inventory. Quietly. Oliver froze. Lena hesitated. I was meant to. Marcus leaned closer, his voice dropping. You want next week's shifts or not? She swallowed and nodded. Marcus turned to leave, then glanced at Oliver. You. New guy. Off the clock. Oliver forced a nod, anger burning behind his eyes. As Marcus disappeared, Lena's shoulders sagged, like a marionette whose strings had been cut. You don't have to do this, Oliver said quietly. She gave a small, tired laugh. Everyone says that. But no one means it. He wanted to tell her everything then. Who he was. What he could do. How easily he could end this. But undercover meant patience. The next day, Oliver dug deeper. He spoke to former employees. Patterns emerged, unpaid hours, subtle threats, shifts assigned and taken away without explanation. Always under Marcus. Always unreported. Why? The answer came sooner than expected. Late one night, as Oliver returned to the storage corridor, he overheard voices, Marcus's and another man's. The door was slightly ajar. Head office never checks this location, Marcus was saying. I keep labor costs down, numbers look good. You get your cut, I get mine. Oliver's blood ran cold. There it was. Exploitation, neatly wrapped in profit margins. A sound behind him made Oliver turn sharply. Lena stood there, eyes wide, having clearly heard enough. I didn't mean to, she whispered, panic rising. I didn't know you were. Before Oliver could respond, the storage door creaked open, and Marcus stepped out, his expression darkening as his gaze flicked between them. Well, Marcus said slowly. This is interesting. Oliver met his eyes, heart pounding, knowing the next few moments would decide far more than just his cover, because whatever Marcus planned to do next, Lena was already trapped far deeper than Oliver had imagined, and the truth behind why she couldn't simply walk away was something Oliver was about to uncover whether he was ready for it or not. Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. It was the kind of smile that warned rather than welcomed. "You two enjoying a private chat?" he asked lightly, though his body blocked the corridor, cutting off the only exit. Lena's hands trembled. Oliver noticed how instinctively she stepped half a pace behind him, as if seeking cover. That single movement told him more than any confession could. "Just finishing up," Oliver said evenly. "Inventory, right? You ask for it." Marcus studied him for a moment, assessing. "Funny. Agency boys usually don't stay curious for long." "I like to understand how places work," Oliver replied. Marcus chuckled. "Careful. Understanding too much gets people tired." His gaze shifted to Lena. "Didn't I tell you to keep quiet?" "I was just," she began, voice cracking. Marcus raised a hand. "Enough. Clock out. Both of you. I'll deal with this tomorrow." Tomorrow sounded like a threat. They walked out into the cold London night in silence. Only when they reached the bus stop did Lena finally speak. "I shouldn't have been there," she said quickly. "If he thinks I'm talking. Why are you so scared of him?" Oliver asked gently. She shook her head. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me." The bus arrived, hissing as its doors opened. Lena hesitated, then stepped on. Oliver followed, sitting beside her as the city slid past in blurred lights. For a long moment, she stared at her hands. Then, quietly, "I don't have papers." Oliver's breath caught. "I came here 2 years ago," she continued. "Student visa. Then my sponsor disappeared. I reported it. Nothing happened. I stayed because going back wasn't an option." Her jaw tightened. "Marcus knows. He checks. He reminds me." "So he uses it," Oliver said. She nodded. "If I complain, I lose everything. If I leave, I disappear." Oliver felt a surge of anger so sharp it surprised him. He had signed off on policies, compliance reports, ethics statements, yet here was the reality, sitting beside him, invisible to spreadsheets. The bus stopped. Lena stood. "Please, don't tell anyone what you heard." "I won't," he said. "But this isn't right." She gave him a sad smile. "Right doesn't pay rent." Over the next week, things changed subtly, and not for the better. Lena's shifts were rearranged. Longer. Harder. Marcus hovered, watching her every move. Once, Oliver caught him whispering something that made her flinch. Oliver knew Marcus suspected him now. At the same time, Oliver began quietly collecting evidence. Photos of altered logs. Recorded conversations. Messages from former staff willing to talk once they believed someone powerful was listening. The picture grew darker by the day: wage theft, coercion, threats, even forged signatures. One night, Oliver arrived to find Lena already working, eyes red, hands shaking. "They are cutting my hours next week," she whispered. "But still asking me to stay late. That makes no sense." "It does if he wants me desperate." Marcus appeared moments later, clapping his hands. "Team meeting. Quick one." Staff gathered near the prep tables. Marcus smiled broadly. "Head office audit coming soon. So everyone needs to be careful." His eyes locked on Oliver. "Especially new faces." Oliver smiled back, calm on the surface, storm beneath. He knew audits. He knew how easily places like this were polished for inspection. That night, Oliver made a decision. The next morning, he didn't put on the apron. He put on a tailored suit. At exactly 11 a.m., a black car pulled up outside the restaurant. Regional directors stepped out. HR, legal, compliance. The atmosphere inside shifted instantly. Marcus went pale. Oliver walked in last. "Good morning," he said, voice clear, controlled. "I'm Oliver Grant." Recognition spread like a shockwave. Marcus stammered. "Yes, sir. I didn't realize." "That much is clear," Oliver said. "Because if you had, you wouldn't have behaved the way you did." He turned to the staff. "Thank you for your hard work. Please take the rest of the day off. You'll be paid." Murmurs rippled. Lena stood frozen, disbelief etched on her face. In the office, doors closed. Evidence was laid out. Marcus protested. Threatened. Then went quiet. Outside, Oliver found Lena sitting alone, staring at the floor. "You knew?" she whispered. "All this time?" "I needed to see it myself," he said. "I'm sorry it took so long." Tears slid down her cheeks. "Am I in trouble?" "No," Oliver said firmly. "You're protected. Legal team's already sorting your status. And every unpaid hour, you'll be compensated." She covered her mouth, shaking. "Why would you do this?" "Because this company doesn't get to succeed by breaking people," he replied. "And because you deserved someone to notice." She looked up at him, eyes full of something fragile and new. "What happens now?" Oliver glanced back at the restaurant, where managers were being escorted out, systems frozen, truth finally exposed. "Now," he said quietly, "we fix what was hidden." But as the day unfolded, Oliver realized Marcus hadn't acted alone. Names surfaced. Patterns connected across locations. The problem was bigger, deeper, more rooted than one man. And Lena, unknowingly, was standing at the center of something that could either change everything or place her in even greater danger, depending on how far the truth was willing to go next. The legal team worked fast, but not fast enough for the tension that settled over the following days. The restaurant was temporarily closed under the excuse of renovations, though everyone involved knew it was really being scrubbed of lies rather than grease. Oliver moved between meetings, calls, and quiet interviews with staff who were finally speaking freely. Each story echoed the same theme: fear disguised as gratitude, survival mistaken for loyalty. Lena was placed on paid leave immediately. A hotel room was arranged under her name, discreet and secure. Yet despite the comfort, she barely slept. Every knock at the door made her heart race. Oliver noticed. He checked in more often than he probably should have, bringing updates, reassurance, sometimes just coffee and silence. He never pushed her to talk, but one evening, as rain traced thin lines down the window, she finally broke. "He's not the only one," she said softly. Oliver looked up. "Marcus?" She nodded. "There were others. Different places. Different names. They talked to each other." "How do you know?" "Because sometimes Marcus would hand me his phone and tell me to translate messages. He said my English was better than his." Her fingers curled into the sleeve of her jumper. "I didn't realize what I was reading until later." "What kind of messages?" She swallowed. "Lists. Names. Hours shaved off. Who could be pushed harder. Who couldn't complain." Oliver felt a chill. "Do you remember any of the names?" "Yes," she said. "Most of them." That night, Oliver didn't sleep either. What followed was not a single investigation, but several. Quiet ones. Parallel ones. The deeper they went, the clearer it became that Marcus was a middleman, not the architect. Labor costs had been manipulated across multiple locations, always targeting the same type of worker: undocumented, desperate, invisible. And someone higher up had been approving the numbers. At a board meeting 2 weeks later, Oliver sat at the head of the table, listening as reports were presented with rehearsed calm. When the presentation ended, he folded his hands. "Before we move on," he said, "I'd like to discuss something I witnessed personally." Silence followed. He told them everything. Not as a CEO, but as a dishwasher. Late nights. Altered logs. Threats whispered where cameras couldn't hear. Faces around the table shifted. Some in shock, others in discomfort, one or two in thinly veiled irritation. "This is serious," one director said carefully. "But we need to be cautious. Allegations can damage reputations." Oliver met his gaze. "So can truth." Files were slid across the table. Names highlighted. Patterns mapped. One director stood abruptly. "This is outrageous." "Yes," Oliver agreed. "It is." Resignations followed within days. Others were suspended pending investigation. External auditors were brought in. The press wasn't told, not yet, but the company's foundation was quietly shaking. Meanwhile, Lena was called in to give a formal statement. She nearly didn't go. Oliver waited outside the room as she spoke to lawyers and immigration specialists. Hours passed. When she finally emerged, her face was pale but steady. "It's conditional," she said. "Temporary protection while the case continues." "That's good," Oliver said. "It buys time." She nodded. "Time is something I've never really had." Weeks turned into months. The scandal widened, then broke. Headlines were careful, but sharp. Industry insiders whispered. Other workers came forward. The company's share price dipped, then stabilized as reforms were announced publicly and enforced privately. Oliver insisted on more than statements. He pushed through mandatory audits, anonymous reporting channels, third-party oversight. Some shareholders complained. Others applauded. Oliver accepted both. One evening, long after the worst of it had passed, Lena met Oliver outside the now reopened restaurant. It looked different, brighter, lighter. New management. New faces. "I've been offered a role here," she said. "Front of house training. Paid. Proper contract." "That's excellent," Oliver said. She hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready to come back." "That's okay too," he said gently. "You don't owe this place anything." She smiled faintly. "I know. But I think I want to reclaim it. On my terms." They walked together for a while, neither speaking much. The city hummed around them, alive and indifferent. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Going undercover, I mean." Oliver considered the question. "I regret that I needed to. But I don't regret what it showed me." She nodded. "You saw us." "Yes," he said. "And I can't unsee it." They stopped at a crossing. Traffic rushed past, headlights streaking like unfinished thoughts. "There's something else," Lena said. "When this is all over, when my status is settled, I want to study again. Law. Or social policy." Oliver smiled. "You'd be good at that." "I know," she said quietly. "Because now I know how the system breaks people. And how it can be fixed." As the light changed, they crossed together, unaware that in another office, miles away, someone was reading through leaked documents with growing concern. Documents that connected Oliver's company to others, documents that suggested the problem wasn't limited to one brand, one chain, or even one industry, and that the next phase of the truth would demand a choice from Oliver that could cost him far more than his reputation. The email arrived at 3:17 a.m. Oliver saw it only because sleep had once again refused to cooperate. The subject line was empty. No greeting, no signature, just an attachment and a single sentence in the body. "You should look at this before someone else decides you shouldn't." He stared at the screen for a long moment before opening the file. What unfolded wasn't just an extension of what he already knew. It was a map, meticulous, deliberate, and damning. Financial transfers disguised as consultancy fees. Shared legal firms. Identical clauses buried deep inside employment contracts across different hospitality groups. Different brands. Different boards. The same quiet mechanics of exploitation. This wasn't corruption operating in shadows. It was systemic. By morning, Oliver had forwarded the file to two people only: the external counsel he trusted most, and the head of compliance who had stayed when others fled. Then he went to the office earlier than usual, arriving before even the cleaners. By noon, rumors were already moving faster than facts. Lena sensed it before Oliver said a word. She had learned how to read tension the way some people read weather. "Something's wrong," she said when they spoke that afternoon. It wasn't a question. He didn't deny it. "There are connections. Bigger ones." "How big?" "Enough that if we pull the wrong thread, it won't just unravel one company." She went quiet. "And if you pull the right one, then a lot of people who've never been named will suddenly be very visible." She folded her arms. "That sounds dangerous." "It can be." "Then why are you still considering it?" Oliver looked at her, really looked, at the steadiness that had grown where fear once lived. "Because once you see the full picture, pretending not to becomes its own kind of crime." That evening, Oliver was called into an unscheduled meeting with two major investors. Their tone was polite. Their message was not. "We admire your principles," one of them said smoothly. "But there's a difference between reform and self-destruction." "The company is stabilizing," the other added. "Dragging in outside industries, other boards, it's unnecessary." Oliver listened, hands folded, expression unreadable. "You're suggesting I stop," he said finally. "We're suggesting you be selective," the first replied. "There are limits to how much truth the market can absorb." After they left, Oliver sat alone for a long time. Later that night, his phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Grant," a man's voice said calmly. "You don't know me. But we share an interest in keeping certain systems functional." I doubt that, Oliver replied. A pause. Then a soft chuckle. Idealism is expensive, especially when it threatens people who can afford to respond. The call ended. The next day, a tabloid ran a piece questioning Oliver's leadership. Anonymous sources. Carefully worded doubts. Nothing overt, just enough to seed uncertainty. By the end of the week, regulators requested additional documentation. Shareholders grew restless. Internal pressure mounted. And then Lena received a letter. She found Oliver immediately, the envelope still trembling in her hand. They are reviewing my protection, she said, voice tight. They say new information has been submitted. Oliver's jaw tightened. By whom? They wouldn't say. He took the letter, scanning it quickly. It was vague. Too vague. They're using you, she said quietly. To get to you. Oliver felt the weight of it settle in his chest. This wasn't collateral damage anymore. It was leverage. I don't want you to stop, Lena continued, before he could speak. But I need you to understand something. What? If this gets worse, I might have to disappear. Again. The word landed heavily between them. No, Oliver said. We'll find another way. Sometimes there isn't one, she replied gently. Just choices. That night, Oliver authorized the release of the documents to regulators, not the press. Carefully timed. Carefully controlled. Within hours, the reaction was seismic. Investigations were opened across multiple sectors. Politicians made statements without saying anything. Industry leaders denied knowledge with identical phrasing. And Oliver's inbox filled with messages, some supportive, others thinly veiled warnings. Lena was moved to a different location. Fewer updates. More security. Less certainty. Days passed. Then weeks. One morning, Oliver arrived at his office to find his access temporarily restricted pending review. No explanation. No timeline. He sat in a conference room instead, watching the city through glass that no longer felt like protection. A knock came. It was his counsel. They are preparing to make an example, she said quietly. Of you. Or of someone close to you. Oliver closed his eyes briefly. And Lena? They are watching her file very carefully. He nodded once. Then we accelerate. What? We don't wait for permission anymore. That evening, Oliver stood before a small group, journalists he trusted, advocates who had been circling the issue for years, and one independent MP who had quietly pushed for reform without backing. He told them everything. Not with outrage. With precision. Names. Numbers. Patterns. By the time he finished, the room was silent. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. As the group dispersed, Oliver checked his phone. A single message from an unlisted number. You crossed a line. He typed back only 4 words. So did you. And somewhere across the city, Lena sat alone, staring at a packed bag by the door, knowing that the truth Oliver had unleashed was moving faster than either of them could control, and that whatever came next would demand a sacrifice neither had yet named. The knock came just before dawn. Lena froze, one hand on the zip of the bag she still hadn't closed. 4 days, sleep had been shallow and alert, as if her body knew rest was a luxury she could no longer afford. The knock came again, firm, not aggressive. When she opened the door, it wasn't officers standing there. It was Oliver. He looked tired in a way that went beyond lack of sleep, but his eyes were steady. It's over, he said softly. She didn't believe him at first. She had learned not to. Over how? He stepped inside, lowering his voice. The review on your case has been closed. Permanently. You're protected. Full status. No conditions. Her knees nearly gave way. She sat down hard on the edge of the bed, breath leaving her in a shaky laugh that turned into tears she couldn't stop. They tried, Oliver continued. They pushed hard. But once the documents went public, too many eyes were watching. They couldn't quietly undo what was already in the light. She covered her face. I thought they were going to make me disappear again. I know, he said. That was the last card they had. And they lost it. Across the city, the fallout was impossible to contain. Executives resigned under pressure. Others were suspended pending criminal investigation. Regulatory bodies that had once moved cautiously now raced to prove relevance. New protections were announced, not as promises, but as enforceable law, named after no one, but born from countless unheard voices. Oliver lost his role as CEO within the week. The announcement was framed as a mutual decision. Markets reacted briefly, then moved on. Power always pretended it was unchanged. But something had shifted. Oliver didn't retreat. He stood before cameras, not with anger, but with clarity. He spoke about systems, not villains. About accountability, not revenge. About how success built on silence was still failure. And people listened. Former employees reached out. Other industries followed. Whistleblowers who had waited years finally stepped forward, emboldened by the fact that someone at the top had chosen to fall forward instead of looking away. Months later, Oliver and Lena stood outside a modest building near the Thames. Inside, a small foundation buzzed with quiet purpose, legal clinics, advocacy training, safe reporting channels. It wasn't grand. It didn't need to be. "This is yours as much as mine," Oliver said, handing her a folder. She smiled. "I never wanted ownership. Just impact." "You've got both." Lena had enrolled in her studies. She worked part-time at the foundation, translating not just language, but fear into something actionable. When she spoke to others who had been exploited, they listened, not because she promised miracles, but because she understood survival. One evening, long after closing time, she and Oliver sat by the river, watching reflections ripple across dark water. "You know," she said, "I used to think being invisible was safer. And now I know it's the most dangerous thing there is." Oliver nodded. "Power depends on people believing they're alone." She glanced at him. "You gave up everything." He smiled faintly. "I gained perspective. That's worth more than a title." Across the water, lights glowed steadily, ordinary, unremarkable, enduring. Years later, when people spoke about the scandal, they argued over dates, names, numbers. They debated leadership and policy and market consequences. But those who had lived through it remembered something else. They remembered the dishwasher who stayed late because she had no choice. They remembered the CEO who chose to listen instead of look away. They remembered the moment silence broke. And somewhere in the city, in a small office filled with quiet determination, the work continued, not loudly, not perfectly, but honestly, proving that when truth is finally seen, it doesn't just expose what was hidden, it changes who we decide to be.